Hi, everybody. Welcome to our newest episode on the Think BRICS channel, your guide to our new multipolar world. I am really excited to have Danny Haiphong with us today to discuss really important recent events in India and Pakistan, as well as how the dynamics between countries within BRICS and the institution itself can help cool tensions and restore peace. Danny, thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I know that I know that the events are relatively recent, but we did unfortunately have an attack in the Kashmir region in neighboring Pakistan and India. And unfortunately, it seems that the borders have been sealed. Diplomats have been sent back from respective countries, and India has so far as gone as to cease the Indus Treaty that allows water to flow, as you can see on the right here, from India into Pakistan, which, given how agricultural Pakistan is still, it will provide a massive, awful shock to farmers and the citizens in Pakistan. So, I guess, Danny, my question to you is where do you see the off ramps on this conflict? Do you think this is something that do you think this is something that can be mediated between themselves?
That's a good question. Potentially, it's hard to know, really, especially when it comes to India and what goes on in the minds of that government, because it kind of walks a very fine line between seeking real sovereignty, political, economic sovereignty, as well also uh, uh, engaging in political, military, and economic policies, which seem to speak to the opposite. And now, of course, so when it comes to India and Pakistan and their governments, it can be difficult to know, okay, well, who is the offender, who is the defender here? But this is a long, ongoing process of the ripple effects of British colonialism that continue to plague these two countries today. But in terms of mediation, no, I actually it could, they could maybe dampen the impact of this conflict. But in truth, uh, when it comes to India in particular, because while both countries have nuclear weapons, both countries have had some level of militarization and military buildup over the years. It's quite obvious that India is really the economic power here, and it has not always acted like it on the world stage. And now we are seeing, with the ascendance of BRICS, a potential for India to do this. But if India is going to do this and it's going to uh, be a leader, well, it's going to have to find ways to resolve these conflicts in the interests of not just India, but the rest of the world. And I believe that when it comes to a lot of what India does on the foreign policy stage, unfortunately, a lot of it also has to do with China. We know that China and Pakistan have a deep friendship that dates back decades and decades and decades. It has a robust partnership with Pakistan through the China Pakistan Economic Corridor. This is 62 plus billion US dollars worth of investments, the first transit system in Pakistan, water facilities, infrastructure development of all kinds. And we know that India is not happy about this and has engaged with the United States on its China containment policy. But at the same time, India and Pakistan, at both as countries, they need to develop their sovereignty, and they need to settle this issue. So, really, I see it, and this might not be a popular take, but it really is a responsibility. If India is going to be an economic power in the world, if it's going to be a leader in multipolarity, then yes, it's going to have to step up to the table and settle these disputes in ways that conform with international law. And right now, we don't really see that. And this has been a pattern, I believe, that while India has taken some steps, it didn't follow the sanctions on Russia during the Ukraine conflict, and it's strengthened its partnership in BRICS. I think we've seen still India walk this line sometimes well far into the lane of um, navigating the world almost in conjunction and in lockstep with the United States and its foreign policy, and how it sees its hopes for India as a bulwark against China. So this conflict between India and Pakistan, it really is a reflection of this ongoing dynamic that I see as most important here is, can India become a leader, become sovereign enough as the economic power? Pakistan has its role to play, but we have to be honest that if India is going to be a major player in BRICS, if it's going to be a multipolar power, it's going to have to be the one. If it's going to really truly live up to this, what the Western mainstream media calls like this new China, it has the biggest population and it has a GDP growth that's impressive. Well, it's going to have to take care of what we don't hear much about, which is this extreme poverty that exists there, which is the uneven development, which is just absolutely wreaking havoc on society, and these border conflicts with Pakistan, with China, that in large part India has a huge responsibility around, and its elites have this dynamic where they they see themselves as almost a spitting image of the West, but it's time that whether they'll learn it or not, but truthfully, hopefully, India does as a whole, as a nation, that this is just not its role in the world. Its role in the world is to be part of this major push in development of multipolarity, which will bring India and the rest of the world far more benefits than the path of war and conflict, which the West loves to see. The West wants to see India and Pakistan at war. It wants to see this division. It would love to see a conflict explode in this part of Asia, so to ensure that chaos can spread elsewhere. This is a big part of the U.S.'s and the West's model of foreign policy at this point, to stop true sovereignty and economic development from moving forward.
Yeah, outsourcing chaos, I definitely can. That's, if I could explain the United States foreign policy in a nutshell, it'd probably be outsourcing chaos. And I think it's interesting considering that following Indian independence, where it started with Gandhi and now shifted from Gandhi to all the way to Narendra Modi, who is a Hindu nationalist by all means, and obviously with the discrimination against Muslims in India, but also because Pakistan in particular is a Muslim majority country, it makes the need for India to step up, like you said, that much more apparent. So, do you really see a neutral party in here that can navigate the way to peace? I don't see China doing it because of the history India has with China, but I also don't know because of India's strategy that we've seen that seems like it could be anyone's guess, really.
Well, it's difficult to say. I mean, Saudi Arabia could certainly act as a kind of conduit to BRICS, because while it may not be a full BRICS member, it does have deepening partnerships both with China and Russia, and its diversification is very real. While it doesn't always have what maybe people around the world would want to see, which is a change in the role that Saudi Arabia plays maybe on the world stage when it comes to Palestine, for example. It has had an impact even on this war on Yemen, where Saudi Arabia has rejected U.S. refueling in the bombing campaign there. We could see that as a byproduct of the normalization that occurred and was brokered in China in 2023 between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So its role in BRICS and its relationship with BRICS countries is very real, and it's possible, and so it could act as a conduit. But whether it can mediate something like this is another story altogether. China, of course, is out of the question in large part because yes, India will never really. I don't think we're going to see India sit down with China and do real diplomacy at this kind of level anytime soon, and unless it's about disputes between those two countries. And of course, India is not happy with China's relationship with Pakistan. So, all in all, really, truthfully, I think this is a big topic that needs to be explored more. Well, it is difficult in this time in global and world development to talk about neutrality because when you have a situation where even in conflicts like this one that we're talking about, we have to factor in that the world order as a whole is dominated by Washington, or at least is attempted to be dominated by Washington, and that uh, 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 instability and chaos that is sowed is really splitting the world in different parts. And we talk about multipolarity, but multipolarity is quickly becoming almost a bipolarity, where you have on the one side the US and those that follow its diktats, and on the other, you have those seeking to pursue a deeper relationship with the multipolar world. And then you have many countries like Saudi Arabia, and even you could say India, despite being a full BRICS country, really doing the same, trying to diversify, trying to walk a tightrope between both sides. It's hard to talk about a neutral party helping to negotiate out of conflicts like this when, in truth, the world is kind of at this stage where a decision has to be made. Is there going to be a real resolution toward the problems and the root causes of these kind of conflicts? Or is there going to be a continuation of the same old divide and conquer, divide and rule, the chaos, the instability that, of course, the West, the collective West, Washington leading it, really wants to see at this time? While they have all kinds of investments in India, for example, as a bulwark against China, that doesn't mean they want India to be strong. They just want India to drive a wedge. They want India to be used in this way. They don't want to see India get rich. They would love to see India remain poor and to eventually, um, um, fall apart under the weight of its own contradictions. That's ultimately the goal and the plan, if there is a plan at all, which I don't think there is. But that's the hopes. We've seen it again and again with countries like India, where when they get too powerful, when they take too much leadership, when they assert too much sovereignty, that is when they get undercut. And so the vulnerability that the multipolar world is in conflicts like these. Yeah, there really is no good mechanism for this, because while BRICS in the multipolar world is trying to come together on things they can agree on, it is very difficult to settle disputes along lines that reflect the continued impact of this unipolar world on those countries that really are going to be so key toward changing this world order for the better. India being a big one. Of course, Pakistan will be a big one as well. But it really is, when we're talking about economic development and the future of development itself. So, yes, humanity needs India, being that it's such a big part of humanity, to play a positive role in this. And right now we see um, some moves toward that, but still a lot of ball and chain still being dragged from its unfortunate and long history with Western interventionism and the legacy of its colonial past.
So I think with another really important part of the Indian Pakistan issue is the threat of the halting the treaty um, that allows access to the Indus River, like we were talking about. Would you call something of denying a country access to a river? And do you think that halting a treaty like that, you can see parallels of it with the United States, for example?
Well, in short order, yes. The thing about this is that you made a good point about BRICS serving as a possible space for mediation, and that is 100% true, and that will occur. And it might be very interesting also to throw in that Russia has very good ties with Pakistan, really strong ties with India. It might be worth Russia being considered as a mediator, in the future around this issue. But of course, there are many other dynamics that surround both of these countries that might make that difficult as well. So, in respect to your question, though, yes, this is a form of economic war. This is one way to starve a population, to endure suffering, so that they are punished for really what the pretext is this terrorist attack that occurred on April 22nd. Well, to punish an entire population for this. That's a war crime, and we've seen how the United States has sponsored these kind of war crimes in Gaza, for example. The blockade on Gaza and the destruction of its infrastructure, including water facilities, it's absolutely criminal. So yes, and this doesn't do anything for the possibility of peace, and it really is an impediment to the growing multipolar world. I think what we're seeing here is that one of the big challenges of ensuring that multipolarity develops on a stronger footing is that the development systems of individual countries, their politics, the way that they pursue their own development and their own position in the world plays a huge role in how they're going to serve as whether a positive, negative, or some of both force in a new kind of world order. And in this case, it's purely negative. There really is nothing to be gained from something like this, other than uh, pursuing a kind of a power zero sum politics, which is a negation of multipolarity itself. So it'll be very interesting to see. It is in a form of economic war. The United States is really the kingmaker when it comes to economic warfare. But we know that given the influence of a certain kind of elite on Indian politics, given the long history that it has and the current relationships that exist in Indian society, and its foreign policy being very contradictory, yeah, we know that this, while may come as a shock to those who are new to this kind of issue, um, it is not all so surprising that something like this could occur. And yeah, it's a setback, and it'll be interesting to see how the BRICS summit, when it convenes in Brazil, how this issue comes up, because we know that while Pakistan is not a member of BRICS and it doesn't have any kind of membership status, we know that it holds deep relationships, especially with China, regarding economic development. It's in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which Russia is also a part of. So we will see how if this issue even comes up, if it's settled by then, and if not, or settled. I put that in quotes because the disputes and the struggle between these two nations, of course, is far bigger than this incident.
Uh, where does the line between your nation's national interest and, quite frankly, the needs of humanity stop? Or where does that divide become? Because I think that with as pragmatic as Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping are, they understand the severity, or I guess the implications of a conflict like this spinning out of control. So, do you think that whoever mediates this, do you think it is? Do you think it will be more for a country's national interest, or, for example, all of the countries within BRICS and everyone neighboring them their own national interest, or do you think it'll be something where this needs to be resolved for the survival, for humanity's survival, in the same way between the United States and, at the time, the Soviet Union, they needed to come to some sort of understanding that it's more than flags, it's about each other. Do you think there really is a separation between the country's national interests and the international interests, which is the survival of humanity here?
Hmm. Well, um, in an ideal world, if we want to say, or maybe in a preferred global situation, we would say absolutely there should be alignment between the interests of humanity worldwide and the national interests of a particular country and social system within that country. But we live in a world where there are different kinds of social systems, economic systems, and actually the predominant one in the world today is still predicated upon exploitation, domination, zero sum. This is the one led by the collective West and the United States at its head, and unfortunately, many countries have some form of this, whether it's directly influenced and controlled by Washington, or whether in India's case it's a kind of a hybrid. It's on the one hand very dependent upon the whims of the Western order, and on the other hand is attempting to move in a more sovereign manner. But the point here is that the I think this is going to be the quintessential question for the multipolar world, for this element of a new kind of independence that includes economic independence to really come not just to the table, but really to resolve and to address on their respective basis. And the problem here is that a lot of the push toward a multipolar world is going to depend on how nations internally themselves, how people ultimately construct society, because there really is no substitute for this. Russia, China, the leaders of multipolarity, BRICS, multilateral organizations, they're always going to stand by the UN Charter and to follow one of its key principles, which is self determination. Um, of course, in matters of war that ultimately affect not just the parties involved, like India and Pakistan, but the rest of the world, especially regionally, there can be room for others to get involved. But that level of involvement, especially for those seeking to follow the UN Charter, like let's say a BRICS is trying to do, that is going to be limited in many respects by the will and the relations and the dynamics between the parties at war. So, all of this is to say is that, yeah, a lot of this is going to depend on how societies organize themselves, how people move toward changing, whether it is a social order and a political and economic system that serves them or doesn't serve them. And that's why we see this development of multipolarity, the development of these multilateral mechanisms like BRICS, SCO, and others. While we see it as multipolar in some sense, or some people say multinodal, we're seeing a split in the world toward a kind of pursuit of certain kinds of principles, which at the heart have the question of development at root. Because when we think about this, if we talk about pursuing self determination versus pursuing interventionism and war, when we talk about common prosperity, as China would call it, versus pursuing prosperity for a tiny few, what we're really talking about is how societies are developing themselves. What economic order are they following? And while that's not black and white, it's not some kind of Cold War cartoon of full communism versus full capitalism. But what we are seeing is that there are countries in the world attempting to use their governance models and use their economic systems toward uh, um, building up economic sovereignty, which can have broad based benefits for the population, versus the dying and decaying US led order, which is looking to do the opposite, which is looking to siphon off everything toward Wall Street and the military industrial complex. And that's kind of where the world is becoming more and more split. And we are seeing that while, of course, the number of countries that are completely on one side or the other are still relatively few in many respects. And it's hard to uh, uh, sit on one side or the other in some kind of Cold War cartoon in this day and age, given the interconnectivity of everything and given how U.S. hegemony has played a huge role in the financial way of the world and how it works, how the world financial system works. It does stand to say that there's still many countries attempting to navigate this kind of split and storm brewing toward the ultimate break from unipolarity in a very sometimes sophisticated way, sometimes haphazard, but in many times a very complex way of walking a kind of line. And we are really at a historic juncture where eventually there's going to be a break. And how I see that break is, yes, it could be conflicts like this one that ultimately lead toward a nuclear proliferation, a nuclear confrontation, Pakistan, India. I don't see that happening because I don't think neither of these countries can really act on their own, given how much influence that the West can have on both of these two governments. But I do believe that we are moving in this direction where the more that countries diversify, the more they get closer to BRICS, the more that they join BRICS, the more that this multipolar world grows, we are going to see those who really sit on the other side. They sit on the side of injustice, of inequality, of endless war, of profit maximization for the few and misery for the many. We'll see them double, triple, quadruple down on trying to not just maintain that order, but uh, expand it in a way that's really impossible at this juncture, which means that what happens when a desperate empire, when a decaying empire sees itself as having a few, if any, options? Well, I don't think it just waves goodbye and gives up its power and says, we're done here. No, I think we're going to see it become even more belligerent, more bellicose, and consider unthinkable possibilities, which are not so far off, given that, as you said in earlier, that it's not as if the United States, it's not as if the West has not been moving toward confrontation with Russia, with China, which is really, when we talk about humanity, it really couldn't get any more dangerous than this, because these two countries are not going to allow themselves to be um, wiped off the face of the earth just because the United States doesn't want them to rise and doesn't want them to have a big role in the world. No, they're going to defend themselves, and so that is where the real danger lies. And I think this conflict that we've talked about today fits into a larger pattern of how the world is going to shape up in the 21st century, one way or the other.
Thank you for watching this episode on Think BRICS channel. And I really want to thank Danny Haiphong here to discuss the importance of how India and Pakistan's recent conflict can be resolved, and how BRICS itself can revolutionize the development of nations while also allowing us a place to facilitate peace and show reciprocity to nations. Please be sure to like and subscribe this video and follow us on the links below. And also, please be sure to follow Danny on his Substack and his YouTube channel. Danny, I am really thankful that you're able to join us here today, and I'm really enamored with your insights. It's going to give me, I've got a lot to think about tonight about the events moving forward.
Thanks so much for having me.